Manufacturing and industrial environments provide their own unique challenges for wireless communications. Harsh conditions, both indoors and out, create a daunting task for engineers to work through. This is where we come to discuss those challenges, share ideas, and help one another out. My name is Scott McNeil, and welcome to the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop. Welcome, everybody. This is the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop's first ever roundtable discussion. We're going to be talking about industrial versus enterprise wireless design. And I got a whole crew of people with me today to talk about all this stuff. So I'm going to let them go around the table and introduce themselves. And Mark, let's start off with you.
Start with me. Okie dokie. I'm Mark Houtz. I'm CWNE 500. I typically have to tell people that one because everybody always freaks out when I tell them that one. But I'm a network engineer for a bunch of K-12 school districts in the state of Utah. Um, I've been building Wi-Fi networks since about 2006, enterprise grade ones. Really focused more on Wi-Fi starting about 8, 9 years ago. Um, but kind of work in a bit of everything, get to touch all types of technologies, but Wi-Fi is kind of my bread and butter. And then four, 5 years ago, I got involved in the private cellular end of things. So I've got a little bit, I dabble in that side. I got a private cellular network I've been building at work as well. So that's about me. So
Well, that's interesting with the private cellular aspect. Well, that should transition us right into Ali. How are you, sir?
Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for having me here. My name is Ali. I work for a company called Imperium Data, and we are a typical VAR, provide different services. And I handle the wireless side of the things over there. Started my career obviously doing just like everyone else, a lot of, everything, right? And then moved into route switch security, and then Wi-Fi became a thing that everyone wanted, and started with back in the day 802.11b Cisco 1100 access points. 2017-ish moved strictly into the Wi-Fi and wireless field and just try to focus on that as much as possible. Just like Mark kind of moved into doing some private cellular work, and Mark and I started to have tons and tons of conversations around it. And then that's what I've been doing since then.
Well, awesome. Welcome to the show. Jeremy, welcome back, sir. It's glad to have you back. If you could tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Oh boy. Well, I'm Jeremy Baker. I'm an industrial network engineer, primarily doing high availability wireless for a company called Prism Systems. We're a systems integrator. I primarily touch AGVs, AGCs, overhead cranes, occasionally entertainment, and try to stay away from firewalls.
Oh man. And for those who aren't familiar with me, my name is Scott McNeil. I work for an industrial integrator, GPA, Global Process Automation. I come from a long line of wireless background. I worked for a company called Approach Communications some 20 years ago, doing Wi-Fi integration all throughout our downtown area. Moved into working for our local school district, and then one of our colleges here locally. And then about 8, 9 years ago, moved into the industrial sector and never looked back because it's so much more fun. But unlike Jeremy, I go to all the dirty places. I do a lot of work in pulp and paper and specialty chem. So where Jeremy gets to go to the clean, happy spots, I go to the dirty ones.
gotta get your fingers dirty, right?
Yeah, I get everything dirty when you go to these places. You can't help it.
Hey man, steel mills are greasy.
Well, that's true. I've been to some smelting facilities and some ore processing, and it's definitely not a clean, happy place.
That's the ones where you just throw your clothes away before you fly home.
Yeah, you don't even take them home. You just burn them.
Curious, have you done ever any sugar factories?
I have not, but that sounds really interesting. I have a big interest in in industrial agriculture, but I haven't had the chance to do anything in that space yet.
Okay.
I've done a sugar beet facility, like it wasn't wireless, but it was fixing some switching and some of their like drives.
It kind of stinks, no? Like I've passed a couple of times sugar refining or manufacturing facilities. Like, I mean, just passing the facility, it just stinks.
Yeah, well, it's just they just have that big like mass of bio waste afterwards that just sits there decomposing.
Yep.
And the inside of it is nasty too. It's just like stalagmites and stalactites of just goop.
You almost
Just
want to
build up.
like stop eating sugar if you kind of see it, right?
Have you guys been to a paper mill? I'm just saying.
Yeah, those are fun too. Especially when you see some of the stuff that doesn't get recycled that's kind of sitting off to the side.
Yeah.
Hey
All right.
man,
Well, let's get on track
person
here,
did very
guys,
good.
and let's start our design roundtable here. Uh, let's kick it off with um, assessment tools that you like to use before you actually commit to design work. Do you guys have anything specific that you guys prefer over others? What are your go-tos? Don't everybody jump in at once.
Uh, and I mean, I guess, I always like to use multiple tools, not rely on just one. I mean, obviously, Ekahau is, is out there that we kind of use. Also, Hamina, and Nomad. I mean, that's also is something like in my toolkit. Wi-Fi Explorer, I use that a lot for a quick scanning of a network and stuff like that. Sometimes like, you don't need like a, tank for the job, right? So it's like you just pull out your, pull out your laptop, fire up like, Wi-Fi Explorer, and you can quickly take a look at what's happening on the network. So yeah, Wi-Fi Explorer is excellent for something like that.
I'm
Um,
a meta geek guy. I really like their suite of tools. So I bust out with some Tonic and Insider Office for my
Analyzer.
scanning.
Nice. I've seen Insider. I've used Insider back in the day when I used to have a Windows laptop. So I've used that a lot. And yes, yeah, and the Tonic looks pretty good too. I haven't used it, but I've seen like some videos. It definitely looks impressive.
But yeah, with Tonic, they've incorporated a bunch of PCAP and capture analysis into it as well. I actually think IPA is going to be going away because they've integrated it all into Tonic,
They're
which
actually
has a different name.
they're actually changing it to Channelizer. They're bringing it
Right.
back under the Channelizer name. Tonic's going away, but yeah, definitely a cool tool. I use that one occasionally. Um, Also, I love to sometimes you just need a phone. With Android specifically, there's a lot of apps. iPhone, obviously, Apple kind of prevents you from getting some of that data. Although the newer versions of iOS 17 brings some new shortcuts that give you a little bit of more data than they used to. So if I'm in a pinch and need to check the Wi-Fi real quick on my iPhone, I don't have my other devices, I can do that. But if I have my Android device, that always gives me a bit more data to be able to check things. So definitely useful for a quick shot when you don't have all the big tools available at your fingertips in the moment.
Yeah, I've got like Wi-Fi Man and Wi-Fi Analyzer and Analyty and a couple of others. You're right. There's a wide variety on Android.
Well, Scott, I didn't hear this mentioned, but I'll say this. I pretty much anything that I ever start from a discussion level is I open an Excel management sheet of some sort that I have, and then I create a draw IO file. So basically like a Visio type file of the floor plan, and then start kind of quickly sketching stuff up. Just to paint a picture of like, we do a lot of stuff that maybe not necessarily like an Echo House scan or some of that stuff you have to figure out how to fit it in there. So a lot of times it's as corny as it sounds, it's a lot of the kind of back and napkin math where you're or the what's the older guys call it, like the solo cup planning.
Red Solo, Red Solo Cup.
Yeah, and I have no business saying the older guys because I got called a distinguished gentleman on site the other day. So I'm getting old too. But
I
yeah, I mean it's all the same stuff, but that's I mean typically anything that I do, there's some sort of like network drawing that gets started just for that for collaborative purposes later.
and then depending on the site, on what their policies are, I usually take a ton of pictures.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
So those end up being invaluable after the fact.
Yeah.
but you better ask beforehand.
Oh yeah. I've almost been escorted off a site, but fortunately I was able to keep my finger off the picture trigger.
So I think that's like one of the one of many probably. I'm sure there are others too that we probably will come up. But this is one of the things like industrial versus enterprise. Enterprise, you may not have as many restrictions when it comes to taking pictures. Um, but I bet and I'm sure in an industrial environment because there's a lot of confidential machinery and equipment. Like I remember once going into um it's like a I guess like some kind of bread manufacturing kind of facility. And first thing, no pictures unless, and if you do take pictures, you have to like let us see each and every one of them.
Yeah, we've done a bunch of work for Corning. They have a large fiber facility here in Wilmington, and they have a very strict no picture policy because their entire process is all proprietary. They don't want these trade secrets getting out in any fashion.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so it's kind of sometimes, I mean, I don't know, you have to be careful what pictures and videos that you're taking off, especially in the industrial environment. You run into that in kind of enterprise a little bit. I mean, especially in K-12, Mark. I mean, you probably
Oh
can
yeah.
speak on that. Like, you can't go in school because there's students in there, especially like if it's not a high school, if you're in a middle school or if you're in an elementary school. I mean, you have to be very careful what you're taking a video and picture of, right? You got to make sure the kids are not in there.
Yep. Definitely have to be cautious in the K-12. Parents will definitely let you know if their kid's picture ends up online. So
Yeah, that's crazy. You have to be really careful with that. I chaperone a lot of trips for my kids with school and whatnot, and you want to take pictures of your kids while you're out there, and they want to be with their friends, and
yep.
but you can't be putting that out there.
Yeah, we've run into issues with just video. This is kind of a side note, but recording video in the classroom, K-12 or COVID brought a lot of changes to that where teachers want to record their sessions or whatever. And you run into federal laws and some different things when you start sharing those videos out with other students and stuff, and becomes a big whole ordeal nowadays on the privacy side of things. So
I'd be interested to hear what the restrictions are like for medical. I've
yeah,
never worked in medical in general, so I don't know what their restrictions. I realize they have HIPAA and everything like that for the data side, but as far as imaging for planning and stuff, I'm curious to see if they have any restrictions.
I've
So
worked.
HIPAA probably apply there too. If I'm like kind of on site and trying to take pictures and all that, because a lot of times like nurses, doctors, they have screens open and they have patient information right there on those screens, right? If you're taking pictures, you have to make sure that that does not end up when you're, you know, or you don't end up taking a picture of that. Also, you can't obviously you got to make sure the patients are not in that picture. I would think.
Right.
Years ago, I worked for a dental school they were training dentists on uh what are they called? Dental implants. And they part of it was they wanted to record and they had to get full NDAs and everything with every patient they brought in, and not NDAs, but waivers and everything, letting them use that. So definitely a concern in the medical side as well. If you're on site taking pictures, make sure you get the proper um, waivers and things if you're actually going to record pictures and all that. So
Interesting.
And I think some of that like some of this kind of being kind of we've worked out or issues can be alleviated like if you have some kind of master NDA or agreement like if you're a customer and you with a facility like that, and we can sign a mutual agreement and NDA and discuss these kind of things out, hash this out beforehand. That, hey, we're gonna have engineers. They need to go on site. They will need to gather some data, which will include pictures and videos and all. But we're happy to sign the NDA. We're not going to share it. We'll make sure it's secure. Their security team might have questions for the company on how your data retention and where you're storing the data and all that kind of stuff. And I think as long as you can specify the requirements, then it can probably make the process easier later on.
I would agree to that. I would agree to that.
Yeah, and Ali, typically, I don't know about sites you've been to, Scott, but it varies site to site. But a lot of them you'll have to get either like a photo pass, so it's that, or like you have a chaperone anyway. So like if you I've been in some places that are like pharmaceutical manufacturing and stuff, and they have somebody that's basically holding your hand the whole time you're in there. And so, if you need a picture or something, then you get them to take it, and then they have to send it to you over, a secure transmission and watermark it and all that stuff.
Yeah,
And
I've
it's
been through
similar.
that.
Sorry.
No, no, I'm
It's
just agreeing with you. I've been through that. I've had where my escort had to take any pictures that I wanted, and then they had to get them approved and then sent to me.
Yeah, and then we've been doing some government stuff, and it's like the whole that's like the scariest one for me
Yeah.
is like the classified document stuff where you're just like, I can't even like, it's like, can I even like draw, copy this in like a drawing or something? It's like, how do you handle that stuff? And it's an extra headache because then you're like the way you're used to working, you have to kind of mimic it, and you really operate at like a reduced amount of information.
Bring this back to site surveys. That's one of the things, one of the issues Hamina has with some of these sites is they do not want data in the cloud. Hamina is obviously in a browser, everything's up in the cloud. And so you have to kind of be wary with your site tools that you're designing with and surveying with to make sure they fit with the site, make sure they're approved. If the data is being stored in the cloud, make sure they're okay with that, or use Ekahau that stores it locally instead of holding it in the cloud versus the Haminas that put them up on other people's servers. You definitely need to be wary of that when it comes to site surveying tools.
Yeah, that's a similar issue with NetAlly with their G2, G3s when you're doing surveys with their software before it uploads it to their cloud piece. Um, I typically when I'm doing a site survey, I'm an Air Magnet guy. I've just used them for years, and it's all local, so I don't really store anything cloud wise. But with the advent of picking up my G2, that's become part of that. And then, like you were just talking about, Mark, Hamina, with everything is in the cloud, so you just have to be more aware of that.
With everything being in the cloud, and I wonder at some point if, because a lot of government companies and all of them use that too, and yes, you can store it locally. I wonder at some point if, whether it's Ekahau or AirMac or AirCheck G2 folks, or Hamina, if they're gonna come up with some kind of like a FedRAMP certified kind of instance, or FIPS 140-2 compliance and all that kind of stuff. It would be interesting if I'm curious if there's a demand for that.
That's a great question. I think we'll have to reach out to Joel on that one.
Let's go bug UC and Joel. Say, Joel, bring that out right now.
Go put it in their suggestions. They'll have it out next week.
They'll have it out tomorrow or by the end of the day at their speed.
All right, UC Joel, there's a feature request coming.
Let's see
So,
if we can sneak some stuff in there.
right. So moving on, let's talk about some environmental challenges that are different, from industrial manufacturing versus standard enterprise. I know from working both sides of the house, the standard office environment, there wasn't a whole lot you had to be overly concerned with environmentally. You just needed to. I mean, your biggest challenges were elevator blocks, or how much is going to bleed through the floor above you or below you, or if the cubicles were going to interfere with VoIP. But in the industrial world, that's a whole nother universe because you have so many different interferers. The environments are mostly steel, and reflection is just kind of off the charts. What are you guys seeing current enterprise wise?
I mean,
My, whoop,
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, Ellie. Um, my viewpoint is building networks for more number of devices than coverage. Industry has moved largely away from coverage and into providing connectivity. In the K-12 space, you get 30 plus students in a room, all wanting to stream YouTube at the same time. That can fluctuate. One classroom's using it for 1 hour, and the other classroom next door is using doing paper, pencil things or other things. But everything is on Wi-Fi now. You every you don't have hardly any computer labs. Everything is now a mobile laptop or iPad that is moving around a classroom, um, and can be used all the time. So you have to really design things to the number of users instead of just coverage. If you were doing coverage-based designs in the past, in those type of environments, it definitely will not work very well moving forward for your new designs.
So you're saying it's more of a capacity design versus a coverage design.
Yes. Yep.
Because so back in the day, right? To Mark's point, a lot of times, what I would see is so a quick example, right? Or where Cisco controller sometimes, like if it would generate these traps and it would say like coverage gap detector, right, and all that kind of stuff, right? So sometimes people would see that, or sometimes like they'll look at their phone or device and they'd see like they're at like have bars, right? So sometimes they'll measure the performance of the whole Wi-Fi network based on the bars. And I got only 2 bars or 3 bars, and I want to see the full bars. Well, just because you have 2 bars or 3 bars does not necessarily mean that you're actually experiencing issues, right? So, I mean, you can have next 70, next 72 on your device, but depending on what you're doing, you might be fine. You might not have any issues and problems, right? And immediately when people jump to like, oh, I'm gonna need to add more access points in that area, right? And then now that creates a chain reaction and it probably may not be the best idea. So yeah, focusing on like, the user experience and device, what the devices are experiencing is kind of definitely important. In my own environment, right? Sometimes like I have areas where there's not good enough coverage and all that, but every single device is reporting back as like no problems and issues. I mean, they're meeting 100%, throughput SLA.
I have found that when talking to clients, they just want to see that sea of green. They don't understand that you can have some variance and flux and everything is still going to work just fine. And that's one of the reasons I kind of like the Hamana tool is because you've got that little roaming guy that you can roam around and show them, this is just because this is not your super dark green right here, doesn't mean it's not going to work or you don't have coverage.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. Well said. Yep. Just because if it's yellow and all that, I mean, it's still fine. It's still good and it's going to work, right? I mean, then I guess it depends on the environment, right? If we're talking like an LPV or really high capacity density requirements or something, that changes things a little bit. But in average enterprise environments, right, carpeted office space and all that, it's normally fine. You don't have to kind of go crazy.
Jeremy, I don't know what your experience has been, but I know from mine, density typically is not the major thing that we're trying to accomplish. It's reliability for a very specific set.
Yeah, that would be so kind of back to what Ali was saying and what you guys were saying. I'll touch on a couple things. The first of which is, the sea of green concept. And when we do like an AGV system evaluation, we're pretty much going along the lines of something like you would design for a voice system. And, we say, hey, here's 4 kind of parameters. And you have to be careful with the way that you word it, because if you say, okay, well, this is like a pass fail situation, if you say fail, then the checkbox checker person freaks out and they're like, oh, we didn't pass this thing, and it's like, dude, you got like one small area that's slightly below this. Like, the vehicle's probably going to be fine running through here. This is just a best practice, and not all sites meet these things at 100%. And it's like, we can adjust power, we can do some of these things, but just being obsessed with explicitly like it's all got to be green, or there's all kinds of factors that go into it. Density for us really becomes an issue in something like an entertainment system, where maybe it's like a vehicles on an R-coax segment, where it's kind of like a CISO situation, and you might have 4 or 5 or 6 vehicles end up on like a 200-foot segment of coax, all talking at the same time with a 4 meg or a 5 meg throughput requirement for the vehicle. So that'll be kind of where you run up against density. But typically it's, you want the environment as clean as possible, and you want to reduce layer 2 transmission or retransmissions.
Yeah, latency is a huge deal. I mean, because we're not worried about cat videos. We're worried about that robot functioning, or we're worried about that processor getting that data transmitted in the timely manner like it should have.
You're
Yeah,
telling
because
me
if it
to watch cat videos in industrial environments? Come on, man.
Well, it depends on the plant. If you're working in a dog food plant, they really frown on cat videos.
The thing about what you're talking about there, you want to reduce latency, right? That's what you guys are trying to do. Robotics, absolutely, you want the lowest latency possible. The private cellular industry has been really pushing that latency 5G piece. That's kind of been their bread and butter for the last several years. But with Wi-Fi, you're starting to get Wi-Fi 7 with MLO that potentially could help bring some of that with some of the updates coming with Wi-Fi 7, where they can select which band they're transmitting on, which one's got the least um, congestion at the moment of broadcast, and so they can switch between the two. So there could be some definite improvements with Wi-Fi 7 when it starts getting rolled out. Obviously, it's not going to be rolled out to most of the devices that you're putting in your factories and things for a long time, but there definitely could be some benefits when it comes to Wi-Fi 7 to help reduce that latency. In addition to the private cellular people that are pushing that it's better for them too. So
I think even Mark, with Wi-Fi 7 out there and with this, MLO and all the other features that Wi-Fi 7 offers, private cellular, I mean, I can see a couple other things that still will be superior, right? I mean, for example, like, how the clients actually, will see the signal from a private cellular radio, right? Versus a Wi-Fi access point. And then the roaming piece, right? Obviously, because the infrastructure is handling the roaming. I mean, the pretty, general common knowledge, right there, right?
yes,
With Wi-Fi, it's the clients that are trying to dictate that, versus with private cellular, it's, it's the infrastructure that's handling that. I think that probably will still be superior than Wi-Fi 7.
Well, and something
Mhm.
else too, and I'm sure Jeremy can attest to this, because when it comes to robots, it's not just a standard client that you're putting on them. You're using other APs, and typically it's a system to where uh the infrastructure, Ali, like you were saying with cellular, the infrastructure is actually dictating roaming versus the individual client because of how the radios work together.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess in certain scenarios, I can see, like, for example, I mean, if you have something stationary in your manufacturing plant or your warehouse or environment, let's say printers, right? And you want to put them on the forklift, uh, and you try to add, you can, some printers or these devices may support like a built-in Wi-Fi card or something like that. It may not work. I mean, I don't know, it might be a 1x1 card in there, which obviously is not going to work out too well. But if
Yeah,
you
using a wireless printer with its own wireless card on a fork truck is is a terrible idea.
Yeah. So imagine. I mean, my thought process is, I mean, if you can take like a Cradle Point or something like that, or Digi, or one of these devices, and you can basically connect that, one of the UEs that you can connect that to like your private cellular network that's in your environment, and just connect the device itself using Ethernet cord. Well, technically, then device is no longer doing the roaming. It's the UE that's doing the roaming, right? So the device, its IP and everything, it stays the same, whatever it's getting from the, Cradle Point. And I think that can, alleviate a lot of issues with regards to roaming and that kind of stuff.
We know before we go too far down the private cellular rabbit hole, I think we're going to end up doing a whole episode just on that. Uh, to kind of keep us on track, let's go ahead and move on to our next area that we wanted to discuss, which just, and I doubt it's going to take long, but location access. Um, in general, most sites that I go to, there are a fair amount, and this will kind of segue into our next section as well. There's a fair amount of safety requirements and safety training that you have to do before you can even go on site. Then you have to make sure you have all your proper PPE, and they check that when you get to the gate. And then you have to know who your contact person is. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to let you free roam around the facility. So you're going to be escorted around the entire time. Jeremy, is that pretty much your experience?
No, not always. I mean, sometimes it is. Sometimes you definitely have people, but in some sites, it's you're like you would think that you should be escorted, and you're just completely alone. I mean, the maintenance people that are supposed to be with you will disappear because they want to go home, and you're just wandering around in a facility that's got dangerous chemicals or high voltage or all kinds of stuff that can kill you. So it's sometimes it's not fun in that regard.
You know what's interesting? Detention centers when you're trying to go and do. Mark, have you ever been to one of them?
I haven't.
Yeah, that's been to few, and that's interesting. I mean, the
Actually,
security around it, and then the population in there. I mean,
Not since that bar fight in '89, anyway.
I mean, you're getting escorted by a couple of like, officers, right? Pretty much in there to just make sure keep everyone away from you.
actually, Ellie, I actually have prisons that I actually do work in. I take that back. I have been to them.
Yeah, I figured
I
you might have.
have I have with the K-12 systems, they have adult ed programs, and you definitely do have to click every door and get escorted everywhere you go. And I had one time I was in a jail, and I was working with the lady who was the adult ed instructor, and she was giving a high school diploma test to one of the inmates, and her husband is the jailer at the jail. He comes in and he thought I was the inmate because the inmate hadn't arrived yet. And I was trying to get the computer working. He thought I was the inmate. I wasn't in a jumpsuit. I was in street clothes. I'm like, but he was a jerk to me. And later she told me that that's why he was treating me so bad, because he thought I was the inmate. And so I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, you definitely have constraints within those locations. I don't have to design the Wi-Fi there. That's other people, but I have to make the technology work in those locations. And they don't always put the Wi-Fi everywhere because they don't want the inmates on the Wi-Fi with devices everywhere. So definitely constraints with those sites.
We've actually got a product that we've produced that's like for detainment facilities that has like it's basically like a wireless charging dock, so that way people can like check in and out their devices, and it's like a locked kiosk red box type of deal. It's pretty interesting, kind of just hearing, how you have to have like access control and almost like an automated system, like an interlock to prevent escapees um and stuff like that.
On the client side, they have a lot of requirements as well. Laptops have to be hardened. They can't remove keys. And a lot of times they're like transparent, so they can't be hiding stuff on them or different things. So definitely an interesting space to work in.
I've had a couple of well, maybe more than couple incidences that happened where I got locked. Once was in a kitchen that I got locked. I was not able to get out, and there's been a few times where I got locked in MDF or IDF closets and stuff, and there was no way for me to come out. Apparently, then I had and it was pretty hot in there, right? I mean, not enough cooling and all, so it was hot, and then I had to wait they had to find somebody who actually only one person who had the pass or a key to open it, and they went home and they had to come back, and while I'm in there like sweating, right, just like, and so that's been some challenges around because when you ask them, hey, do I need a key or a pass for these locate to access different areas, normally the answer you get is like, oh yeah, yeah, everything's open. You're fine. Go ahead, do it. And then okay, you start doing it. And so now I have this thing where every time I go in a room, I always prop the door open a little bit if I kind of have even like, slightest feeling that it may not like open from inside.
Think about it as typical enterprises is a lot less restrictions than some of these environments, especially K-12 schools. They let random people, yeah, typically you have to sign in with the badge and you have your little sticker saying you're a visitor. And hopefully the staff are checking it, but they're typically so busy they don't even care in that regard. So you have so many volunteers in and out of your K-12 schools. Other organizations, depending upon their size, may or may not have the same level as that versus a manufacturing site where with machinery or things, it's definitely a risk, and so there's a higher requirement there.
In K-12 marks, like a few times, I mean, not a few times, a lot of times, I ran into a situation where, obviously I was doing a survey. Yes, I had that little, sticker badge that they kind of give you, but not everyone can see that right away, right? So it's like a school officer in the school, or if it's a school that has multiple officers, depending on the size, like they kind of stop you multiple times, right? Who are you? What are you doing exactly? And they want to kind of see and everything like that. So, I think certain environments like that having, that wireless and professionals, the safety thing that we got actually from the WLPC this time around. I think wearing something like that would definitely help, also.
Yeah, that's something that keeps me from being mistaken for anybody else is the fact that when I'm wandering around a site, all of my gear, my hard hat, my safety vest, it's all company branded. So they definitely know I'm not a standard employee.
Yeah, yeah. And then around PPE, right, and stuff like, yeah, a lot of times you go. So like, once I was in so my issue is, I mean, I'm only 5'5", I mean, so it's hard to find PPE gear when I go inside that fits me. So I'm swimming in sometimes in these like, I was this oil and gas facility and I had to wear one of those fire retardant like, PPE gear, and I was literally swimming in that gear. It was like that was the smallest one they had, and and I was like, I had everything rolled up and everything, and it was just so big.
I'm,
That
I'm the
was
opposite end of that spectrum. I'm a larger than average human, so I have to you make sure all the stuff that I get is going to fit because anything they standard have on site, usually they don't make in a 3 or 4X. So I look like a busted can of biscuits that's bright yellow with reflectors on it.
No
fun.
comment.
Come on, Jeremy, you gotta say something.
It's really fun when you get in a paint suit and you get a very uncomfortable inseam for 2 or 3 hours walking around.
Oh, sounds painful.
I was at a local chemical company and we had to go out to look at some of their switching. And in order to go out in the field, you have to wear one of their jumpsuits. And it took 45 minutes to find one that would even come close to fitting with. And when I got into it, I looked like a giant blue walrus. So that's not something I really like to do very often.
I'll take that over getting up in the lift though any day of the week.
Yeah, not a
That's
lift guy.
Yeah, I was scared getting on. You talking about the scissor lift and stuff and boom lifts?
Well, yeah,
Exactly.
but a boom lift over a bus rail
Okay.
in
I
a
initially when I started getting on those, I was kind of scared. I remember once I mean, I was like a boom lift, like 60 feet, I think. And we had to replace these IDFs. I mean, oh, sorry, all the switches in the IDF. And, they were all the way up, like almost like by the ceiling, probably around 35, 40 feet or something like that. And we had to use, and there was some stuff right there too. So we had to use the boom lift. Now we have like, 8 of these Cisco switches sitting on that boom lift, 2 guys on it, and it's getting up there. And I mean, you move a little bit, the whole thing wobbles too, right? So I was like, it was scary
Is
initially.
putting those APs or those switches up there fire code?
It's
No,
definitely hot up there, that's for sure.
yeah, no, there no issues with that. I mean, that was one of the concern and everything, but I think they had some fans and stuff like that. So and insulation and all that kind of stuff. So it was not really hot.
All right. So moving on. This is probably going to be one of my favorite parts of this episode. When it comes to the actual design portion of work, what are your guys' favorite design tools of choice? For me personally, like I mentioned earlier, I've been a an air magnet guy for a long time. Last year, beginning of last year, maybe little bit before that, I was able to get into the beta of Hamina and started using that and discovered that I really, really like that from a design aspect, especially with the presentations that it allows you to do. Um, and then also using the NetAlly cloud tool, I found pretty interesting as well. What are you guys using?
I have been strictly using Hamina, just like you said. I mean, for that, I mean, it was Ekahau, obviously, you did, it was a pretty standard thing, but since same exact thing, beta testing Hamina and getting involved in the development of it, and then seeing what it can do. I mean, especially like the whole 3D view of being able to see things, and they just keep adding these cool features, right? That basically help me explain the design to my customer much better. Does that make sense? Like it's like
That
because
makes
I
perfect sense because that's a
I like
huge, huge deal.
yeah, because customers question your design, right? Why do you have so many APs? Or why you have APs there? Why do you have it? So, and they have legit questions and concerns, and they want to know what, why, where, how all these things. And and I feel like using Hamina and all the different things that you can do and draw in there. I mean, I can draw trees and have like a nice, cool tree view, right? And uh, I can draw cubicles and desks and all kinds of different objects, right? To kind of uh, get as precise as possible, right? And be able to explain what's happening here to my customer. I can zoom in and kind of like almost as if I'm walking at a ground level as I'm seeing the signal, right? And I can kind of go through it. It's pretty fascinating, right? I mean, what they've done and they keep improving. So it really helps my job and makes it much easier, definitely.
Not
For
to
me,
not to turn
mhm.
this into the Hamina show, but the
Yeah, I
fact
mean,
that you can also share that link and then
oh
they
yeah.
can go back and look at it at their leisure,
Oh,
after the fact, that's a pretty big deal as well.
oh man, no more emailing PDF files. Oh,
Yep.
I love that.
Yeah, best thing about Hamina. I definitely use Hamina. That's kind of become my go-to. Recently, we were up for renewal of our ECHO licensing, and so I've been going through testing of different tools. I'm really excited to see what happens with Cytos. Their their survey tool, I'm actually a big fan of it. Didn't mention that before, but I'm a big fan of their survey tool. And I've seen some of the behind the scenes stuff with their upcoming planning tool, and it sounds like it's going to be cool. I've also demoed IB Waves stuff. Went through a whole training course with that and different things. Definitely more on the cellular side. Their Wi-Fi side is definitely not up to snuff when it comes to Ekahau or Hamina on the Wi-Fi side. They are kind of the industry standard on the cellular side. So they are definitely kind of winning over there in that case. But on the Wi-Fi side, it's not very strong. They've kind of just tacked it on. Um, but those are kind of the four big ones I've been looking at. I've settled personally on Hamina or Ekahau at this point, but I definitely am interested in some of the upcoming tools. Is that guys, do they have a planner tools or are they just survey only? Do you know? Yeah, Ali, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's more of so their concept is not of a tool like that you go on site. I think they're more focusing on being able to design using AI. I haven't seen it. Just bunch of conversation that I had them, very smart folks that are actually working on it. I know him and I had some conversations around WLPC. He said, let me know when you have some time, and he'll show it to us. But yeah, I think they're trying to use AI strictly to, and there's just a bunch of data, right?
Yep.
To kind of do it. Do the design portion only. I'd love to see actually the private cellular piece, by the way, in Hamina. Just, again,
Yes.
because this way everything is in this one tool. I'm not trying to go use multiple tools to do this, right? So I'm really looking forward and hoping for that private cellular survey piece in Hamina, as well as SpecAn. I know it's about to come out. It's very soon. It's not too far, but those two things, seeing that in Hamina would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I'll just repeat. We went from doing planning in either Ekahau, instant, depending on who has it, Ekahau or in the air magnet suite, and then a lot of our stuff is kind of just pen. Realistically, it's just like pen on paper too, because some of the, based on field measurements and just doing kind of manual planning, but a lot of that now we've gotten antennas and stuff that we use that are not typically available, and had Hamina add those in. So that's been kind of the primary tool the last like 6 or so months.
There have been some other specialty tools that I've used that just integrate in over top of Google Earth. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Hamina integrating 900 megahertz too into their planner?
Yeah, they have multiple pieces on their higher Planner Plus piece. You can design private cellular, you can design 900 megahertz. I hope they get Wi-Fi Halo in there, which yeah,
That would be nice.
it'd be the same as say a LoRaWAN technically on in some ways, but definitely be cool if you could get Halo in there and just some of these more niche spectrums that were starting to get available to us would be
Well,
cool.
900 megahertz is still very, very prevalent in the industrial era because so many sensor packages run on it. I mean, you have 2.4, which is, a lot of your 802.15.4 runs on, but there's a lot of proprietary stuff in the 900 megahertz range, especially with like wireless IO.
Another tool I've been using, this is more on the private cellular side, wish they had a Wi-Fi piece, is the Google Planner tool. Definitely it's probably your best one to get clutter data without having to pay an arm and a leg to add it into like Ivy Wave or things like that for your outdoor stuff. If you have anything outdoor, it Google is definitely one of the leading organizations out there with clutter data added to Google Maps put on top of Google Maps to help you when you're designing your networks outdoors for environment.
Ivy Wave doesn't do clutter data, right?
It does, but you have to bring your own clutter data. So they have
You
some
can draw
clutter
it
data.
basically.
They have some clutter data you can add in, but you have to you have to source it from elsewhere.
For those of us not familiar, what's clutter data?
Trees, buildings, mountains. Basically they use LiDAR from the satellites when they're scanning LiDAR and different technologies when they scan the earth, build Google Maps. They are also using different tools to gather heights of objects, and so they can tell that there's a tree there.
So
Where-
that's how they kind of render like the 3D
Yep,
aspect view.
Okay.
Interesting.
yep,
3D and shadowing too, right? So like how the signal is gonna kind of look, if it's hitting an object and how it's gonna go around it, like all these different things.
yep. So they can get the height of actually a tree and say there's a tree right there. So when you're putting a point-to-point link up or something, you can know that it's going to have to shoot through a tree right in that location versus if you're just using Google Maps, which is flat. You have no idea. You can look at Google Maps and say, looks like there's a tree right there, but you don't know how high it is. This actually,
You don't know if it's a tree or a giant azalea bush.
yep, you know exactly the height of it from Google with that clutter data.
That's interesting.
So talking about point-to-point connections, have y'all, any of you, either of you, one of you used the link planner from Cambium? I use that a bunch for point-to-point connectivity, point-to-multipoint connectivity.
I have not, but I've heard about it, and I've heard nothing but good things about it.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. It uses clutter data. It's only for point-to-point, point-to-multipoint links and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it uses clutter data and everything, and I love it that I can then export that into as a KMZ Google file and bring it up in Google and kind of see what it will look like.
Well, one of the things I want to do is all these different things that we're talking about. I want to make sure I get links for everything so I can put those in the show notes. So if anybody's interested in further information on any of these, they'll be able to find it easily. I appreciate everybody tuning in. There's a lot more great conversation to come in part 2 of this episode. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we hope you join us on our next episode of the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop.